If you've ever tried to build a team in Esports Manager 2026 only to watch everything fall apart after a few weeks into the season, don't worry, you're not the alone. I spent hours testing lineups, training sessions, and signings until I finally understood what actually makes the difference between a team that stagnates and a team that becomes a champion. That's why today I've put together 10 points that, at least for me, made a significant difference and might help you save some time that I didn't. If you're also trying to understand the game and want to swap this trial and error phase for a slightly more direct path, stay with me until the end. Perhaps one of these tips will spare you the same headaches I experienced. One thing it took me a while to learn in Esports Manager 2026 was the real value of investing in young players with high potential. In the beginning, I was too focused on trying to assemble a ready-made team, but that is expensive and doesn't always yield results. When I started looking more at potential rather than immediate performance, the game began to open up much more. However, it's not just about signing these players. The real secret lies in the contract. When you secure a promising talent to a longer contract, you basically protect your investment. There will come a point when they start evolving rapidly, drawing the attention of larger teams, and if you haven't prepared, you will lose them easily. But here is an important point I learned the hard way. Handed out long-term contracts at the start of a save can complicate things. Your budget is still tight, you don't know if that player will actually develop as expected, and you could end up stuck with expensive contracts that offer no return. So what I do now is much more balanced. In the beginning, I use shorter contracts to test the lineup and understand who is truly worth it. Once the squad begins to click, and I identify those players with genuine growth potential, that's when I invest in long-term contracts. Then it becomes a completely different story, because you begin to build a solid team without being held hostage by the market every season. If there is one trap everyone falls into at the start, it's opening the transfer market and buying the players with the highest ratings without a second thought. I've done it myself. You look at that entry fragger with 95 aim and think, all right, this one is going to carry, but then the season arrives, the team loses to a squad with half your budget, and you just stare at the monitor trying to figure out where you went wrong. The truth is that individual stats on paper don't win championships if the pieces don't communicate with each other. The game genuinely rewards synergy in a way that surprises you. You need to view the team as an organism, not as a collection of isolated stars. The current meta requires each player to have a clear role and for those roles to complement one another. It's no use having 5 players who only know how to open rounds if no one is there to trade, call the strategy, or keep their cool in a 1v3. It's in this balance that the game separates those who truly understand mechanics from those who just assemble a nice-looking team in the menu. What works for me is building the skeleton around specific roles. Pick an IGL who understands the macro game, someone to actually execute entries, a support who doesn't mind handling the utility, and save that spot for the clutch player. And if the meta favors the AWP, you adapt. Don't keep forcing a composition that was good 3 patches ago. Flexibility here is worth gold. When you fit these pieces together correctly, you can feel the team moving on its own, each covering the other's space without requiring constant micromanagement. Ultimately, Esports Manager 2026 is not a fantasy draft simulator where the highest overall wins. It's a tactical puzzle game. You can have the most expensive lineup in the world, but if you don't respect the meta and balance the roles, you will get beaten by an organized team. The best feeling is seeing that squad you built carefully. Not the most hyped, but the most cohesive, turning the game around in overtime because everyone knows exactly their role. That is what makes the difference between a team that shines and a team that lifts the trophy. Many people focus solely on the players and forget that behind a championship team, there is always a well-functioning structure. And here, this makes an absurd difference right from the first tournaments. Analysts, for example, are practically the tactical brains of the squad. They help you understand the current meta, suggest more efficient compositions, and contribute to preparing against specific opponents. When you start utilizing good analysts, you can feel the team entering matches with a much more solid plan, rather than relying strictly on individual skill. Now, the psychologist is an investment that many underestimate initially, but it becomes essential as the season progresses. In long tournaments or during a losing streak, player morale drops quickly. And when that happens, performance drops with it. A good psychologist cushions that fall, maintains focus, and prevents that domino effect of defeats. If I had to give a direct tip to progress faster, it would be this: hire staff early, even if you have to hold back a bit in other areas. Because while other teams are trying to adjust amidst the chaos, yours will already be organized, prepared, and mentally stable. And that, in the long run, puts you far ahead. In the beginning, I relied entirely on scouts, But they take time, cost money, and often don't bring exactly the type of player I needed at that moment. That's when I started testing the external databases that the community uses, like the famous EMDB. Honestly, this speeds up the process significantly. You can find players with high potential, filter exactly by the characteristics that fit your team, and discover names that the game would normally take a long time to show you. What I like most is that this gives you a massive advantage at the start of a save, when every decision weighs on the budget. Instead of spending time and money trying to discover talent, you go directly to undervalued players who can deliver much more than they cost. Today, I use both together, but in a much more strategic way. The external database becomes my foundation for building the squad, and I leave internal scouting more as a complement. This makes everything faster, cheaper, and above all, much more consistent when building a competitive team. You know that urge to reject a sponsor early in your career because the objective seems too tedious? I've done that, and it was a mistake that almost broke my team before the first season even ended. In Esports Manager 2026, you look at that Tier D contract asking for 30 kills or 5 plants a month and think, this is going to get in the way of playing seriously. But the truth is, these sponsors are your financial lifeline in the early months, and ignoring them is like turning down a guaranteed check, because the envelope is ugly. The secret lies in the type of goal. Sponsors that pay for specific actions, kills, defuses, plants, assists, don't care if you won or lost the map. They want to know if the player delivered what was required. This means that even in a 1-3-2 defeat, if your entry got the necessary kills or your support hit the assistance target, the money comes in. In the beginning, when the squad is still forming and you don't have a super team, this income is what keeps the lights on and salaries paid on time. I learned the hard way that winning matches is useless if your cash flow is in the red. I once had to sell a promising player because I couldn't meet the payroll in the third week, all because I rejected 2 small sponsors, thinking I needed to focus 100% on results. Today, I accept these action-based contracts without a second thought. They create a stable foundation that gives me the freedom to make better signings, invest in infrastructure, and not live in desperation with every loss. You need to think like a real manager, not just a coach who wants to win every match. Sometimes, sacrificing a victory or 2 early on to ensure the sponsor gets their numbers is the smartest move in the game. With cash flow secured, you build a team that wins in the medium term instead of assembling a star-studded lineup that lasts 3 weeks before going bankrupt. Trust me, accept the contract, hit the target, and let the money work for you. One thing I ignored at first, but which makes a huge difference in the medium term, is investing in HQ upgrades. I know it's tempting to spend everything on players or staff, but your training base is what sustains the team's evolution throughout the season. When you start improving the base camp, the bonuses become very clear. Better equipment increases the player's skill points during training, and this significantly accelerates individual development. It's not something invisible, you actually notice that your team begins to evolve faster than the others. And there is another important detail. This also impacts performance inside the server. It's not just training, it's actual performance. Those small accumulated gains end up making a difference in close matches, especially against teams that have players at the same level as yours. For me, the ideal approach is always to set aside a fixed portion of the budget for these upgrades, even if it's done gradually. While many people only react to results, you are already building a foundation that constantly improves everything, and in the long run, that transforms an ordinary team into a real title contender. I used to get stuck on the idea that I needed to build everything through permanent signings, and that only limited my team when money started getting tight. Once I started using loans, the game changed significantly for me. Suddenly, you can bring in a player well above your squad's average level, even without the budget to buy them outright. This helps immensely, particularly during specific moments, like when you need a leap in performance for a major tournament. Another thing I noticed is that loans aren't just a temporary quick fix. If used correctly, you can fix clear weaknesses in the squad without compromising long-term planning. Sometimes you are just one piece away from everything clicking, and a loan resolves this quickly and much cheaper. Today, I view loans as a truly strategic tool. When the budget is tight, or when a decisive tournament comes up, I look straight at the loan market. It doesn't solve everything, but used at the right moment, it can be exactly what is missing to transform a mediocre team into a truly competitive one. There is a part of Esports Manager 2026 that I treated as fluff in my first save, and I ended up paying dearly for it. It's that conversation module, Talk, which appears in the corner of the interface as if it were just another decorative button. I ignored it, thinking it was unimportant RPG dialogue and focused solely on tactics and signings. The result? My team started losing games they should have won easily, players missed simple shots, and I had no idea what was happening until I opened one of their profiles and saw morale all the way down in the red due to a relationship issue no one had resolved. Talk isn't just a neat little chat feature. It's a genuine people management tool. You click there, speak with the athlete, and find out they are insecure because of a recent loss, homesick, or simply dislike the role you assign them to play. Resolving this before entering an important series completely changes their performance. You can feel it in the gameplay when the team is united. Rounds close out differently, calls work better, and that underperforming player suddenly starts carrying again. I created a rule after that disaster. Whenever there is a week left before playoffs or a major tournament, I stop everything and do a round of talks with everyone. It doesn't matter if everything seems fine on the surface, I open the talk module and ask. I've prevented locker room crises this way, recovered players who were thinking of requesting a transfer, and boosted the motivation of an entry fragger who was afraid to face a specific team. It's almost as if you are the psychologist and the coach at the same time. If you want consistency in Esports Manager 2026, using the talk module regularly is not optional. It's part of the job. A team with low morale plays below its potential, and it's no use having the best strategy in the world if the players enter the server already defeated. Make this a routine, just like adjusting tactics or renewing contracts. The game rewards those who take care of the squad as people, not as numbers on a spreadsheet. You cannot enter every match with the same plan and expect different results, because the game heavily rewards those who read the opponent and adjust their strategy. Understanding the current meta is the first step, as it dictates what works best at that moment. However, it isn't enough to just copy the meta. The differentiator is how you use it against specific team styles. Some teams are more aggressive, others more defensive, and if you adjust your choices with that in mind, you already start with an advantage before the match even begins. The map veto and selection phase also carries much more weight than it seems. When you begin to adapt your decisions during this stage, avoiding the opponent's strengths and pulling the game to where your team performs best, the win rate increases consistently. It's the kind of adjustment that doesn't show up much but decides series. And during the match, in the live simulation, is where everything is confirmed. Adjusting the tempo, changing the approach, and reacting to what is happening makes all the difference. For me, this is where the game truly shines, because it's not just about assembling a good team, it's about knowing how to read the game in real time and making better decisions than your opponent. I used to try throwing my team straight into major tournaments, thinking we could compete, but in practice, what happened was the team getting run over and me not understanding exactly what was going wrong. When I started participating in smaller regional tournaments, the experience changed completely. These championships are perfect for testing formations, adjusting tactics, and especially understanding how each player behaves in-game. It's a safer environment to make mistakes and learn without being penalized too heavily. Additionally, there is the financial aspect, which makes a big difference. Even if the amounts aren't massive, this initial money helps tremendously to keep the club healthy and prepare for future signings. Not to mention the team's confidence, which grows as you start winning matches and building consistency. Today, I see these tournaments as a foundation. Before thinking about competing with the big names, I prefer to ensure the team is already polished, with a defined strategy and good chemistry among players. Because when you finally reach the larger tournaments, the difference is night and day. You no longer enter just to participate, you enter to actually compete.